Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to The World Over from Washington, D.C. We've got a special show for you tonight, starting with my interview with philanthropist and author Mark Shriver. He's written a loving memoir about his famous dad called A Good Man, Rediscovering My Father, Sargent Shriver. And later we'll discuss the importance of fatherhood, particularly the importance of that father-daughter bond with pediatrician and author of Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, The 30-Day Challenge, Dr. Meg Meeker. So if you're having a problem with your daughter or experiencing some conflict, you won't want to miss that segment. And later, Catholic League President Bill Donohue will talk about his latest book, Why Catholicism Matters, and he'll express it in his own inimitable style. My first guest this evening is a member of the United States equivalent of the royal family. Not only that, he's an accomplished politician who works tirelessly on behalf of needy children. He's also the author of a new book about his father, Sargent Shriver, who was the brother-in-law of John F. Kennedy, founder of the Peace Corps, and one of the architects of President Johnson's war on poverty. He wrote about his father, who's also a man of great faith. Here to tell us about his dad is the author of A Good Man, Rediscovering My Father, Sargent Shriver, is Mark Shriver. People are so familiar with the accomplishments of your father. He's the man who founded the Peace Corps. He led Johnson's war on poverty. Yes. So many accomplishments, the ambassador to France, and the husband of Eunice Shriver, which is no small accomplishment.
Yes.
You, in this book, sort of unpacked the essence of this man. And when he passed away, so many people came up to you and said he was a good man. What did that mean? What did you discover behind that accolade?
Well, you're right. A lot of folks claimed when he was alive that he was a great man for having created the Peace Corps, Head Start, Legal Services for the Poor, Job Corps, Foster Grandparents, Vista. But what they said to me after he died was that he was a good man, including the two women who used to serve him lunch, who waited in the line at the wake and said your dad was a good man, and then turned around and walked out of the church. The guy from the U.S. Air Terminal who said the exact same thing. So I wanted to dig in and try to figure out what it meant to be good as compared to great. And when the lights are on and the cameras are on, and particularly in Washington, D.C., there are a lot of great people that aren't good. But Dad was the same, whether it was talking to Cardinal Wuerl or President Clinton or President Reagan or the waitresses at the restaurant. He treated them all the same, and I wanted to understand how he did that and did it so well and so joyfully.
Yeah, there was this boundless joy about him.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was a buoyant, happy fellow. And you discovered the source of that happiness, that optimism, and real affection. And we'll get into his fathering later, because I think so many of us struggle with, you know, how do you maintain your career and you're supposed to accomplish all these things, and yet there are these little lives that we're in charge of for a small period of time, and how do you balance that? What was the source of that joy and the animating spirit behind this man?
Well, I think, you know, I tried to distill it down, and it came back to faith. I think it was the fact that he went to Mass every day of his life. I think he was raised in a family that believed in the Gospel's call for social justice, to feed the hungry, clothe the naked. His father, or excuse me, his godfather was James Gibbons of Baltimore, the second U.S. Cardinal. His grandfather had gone into the seminary and dropped out twice because he was sick both times. Became great friends with James Gibbons, and that was my dad's godfather. And I think that faith was tested in the Depression and in World War II, but I think it came out of those experiences even stronger. And I think that faith called for acts of hope and love, which is what I think his life was built on: faith, hope, and love.
You accompanied him many times to Mass. You would go to daily Mass with him, and then, of course, on Sunday. What was that like, and did he ever offer any counsel about, because let's face it, it's tough to get up at the crack of dawn and meet this obligation, decide I'm going to go to Mass every day. That's a tough ritual, and yet he maintained it.
He did it every day. It didn't matter whether he was on the road in this country or abroad. Wherever we checked into a hotel, the first question he'd ask is, what's the Mass schedule? So he wanted to go the next day. It was part of his routine, and it made him, I think, when he got down on his knees and asked for help, he realized he wasn't God. And he realized that God was in charge and that he needed God's help. And I think one of the things he did tell me is that before he went to daily Mass, he'd spend 10 or 15 minutes getting ready for it. So it was a process of getting ready to go to Mass, then getting on your knees and understanding that you weren't God and asking for that help and support. And I think it fired him up. He came out of Mass every day excited for the day. And whether the day was just enjoying nature or whether it was enjoying the person in front of him. And that person could be a cab driver, the guy from the gas station, a grandchild, or a cardinal or a president of the United States. But he treated them all the same because he thought that they were really sent from God. Yeah. He really believed that. And I think he believed that God is either everywhere or God's nowhere. And he believed God was everywhere. And that made him excited, but also paradoxically slowed him down so that he could appreciate the moment.
Yeah, no, he was a man who, obviously you need a certain amount of ego to run for public office and to be in the public arena. But that said, he didn't crave it. He didn't crave the affection of the masses and wish to be the center of attention all the time.
No, definitely not. And I think the book is really a process of a son trying to figure out how his father lived that life, how he wasn't really a slave to his ambition and ego. He really thought in more of a cosmic frame, if you will. He wanted to be a good son of God.
It's a beautifully written book, and there's a portion here where you say, Dad was good because he was great in the smaller, unseen corners of life. Explain that.
So that means that when you're on a TV set or you're a politician or you're a wealthy businessman, it's easy, I think, easier to be great because everybody's, you know, telling you wonderful things about yourself. When the lights go off and no one's paying attention, when you're at the gas station, when you're at the grocery store, are you the same to those people as you are to the big shots? And Dad was. He was consistent across the board. And I think that was because he saw everyone as a gift from God. And for this son, trying to figure that out so I can work with my wife of 20 years as we raise our 3 children, as we try to balance faith and family and friends and commitment to job, I needed to figure that out to do a better job as a father, as a husband, and as a friend.
I want to talk about his career and his parenting, but first I need to talk about your mother, Eunice Shriver, who is such a hero. The founder of the Special Olympics, really had this burning heart for people with disabilities throughout her life. You write, it's a funny story about when your father's the ambassador in France. Yes. Tell us about that. And was that
my mother took the when they're training them?
Yeah, bringing people into the embassy. Tell us about that. And and how that happened.
So mother believed that people with developmental disabilities ought to have access to the American embassy just like the big shots in Paris or the big shots from all around the world did. So she brought in people with developmental disabilities, and they would train in the embassy or in the backyard, and they would roll in tires and do athletic drills in the American embassy in the late 60s in Paris, of all places. So she didn't believe in, you know, isolating people.
Right.
And she wanted to bring people together, people with developmental disabilities, and expose them to all the things that other people had. And she knocked down the walls of misunderstanding and prejudice. You got to remember, in the late 60s, most people with developmental disabilities were locked in institutions, forgotten and isolated.
Shut it away.
And she knocked those walls down, and Dad supported her, because I think that's what love demanded. And you got to remember, at that point in time, it's even a more male-oriented society than we have today, where the man is supposed to be out front taking all the credit. And Dad let Mother do that. I don't know whether he let her. I mean, Maria, my sister, said in her eulogy of Mom that Dad let her rip and roar. I don't know whether he let her rip or roar, or whether she was going to rip and roar on her own. But it worked. It was a great partnership. And I think, again, you know, Mother went to Mass every day of her life. So I think it's that common, you know, desire.
They had that common faith, and that, in the hard times, that sustains you.
Sustains you in the happy times and in the tough times. And I think that's what pulled them through 56 years of marriage.
Yeah, and one of the things I took from the book, the joy of this man. I mean, he's out playing on the lawn with you guys. Tell that great story from the 60s, where your brother Timmy falls, and your uncle Bob Kennedy is there, Bobby Kennedy.
Yes.
Tell that story.
Well, the only addition is that was my brother Bobby.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but they're both older brothers, no problem. And Bobby fell. I was about 4 or 5 at the time, so Bobby was about 13, 14. He started to cry. And Uncle Bobby Kennedy said, "You can't cry. Kennedys don't cry." And Daddy scooped up Bobby and said, "Don't worry about it. You can cry. You're a Shriver." And I think the story was that he was comfortable with emotions. You know, he was comfortable with the fact that you could cry. That was normal. He was comfortable with unconditional love. When my brother Bobby screwed up and got arrested for smoking pot, and it was all over the front page of the paper, Dad brought him into his room and looked him in the eye and said, "Look, you're a good kid. I love you. This is going to work out fine. Don't listen to what anybody else says." And I think, you know, when Dad was considering running for governor or maybe even president and the family was on the front page of the paper, he just offered his kid unconditional love and forgiveness. And the same thing happened to me when I backed out of the Peace Corps. The very entity he created, you know, I backed out. And he just said, well, how can I be helpful to you? How can I help you with your career? And, you know, when a son feels that or a daughter feels that unconditional love, there's really nothing you can't do because you know your father is behind you because he loves you regardless of what you're going to do.
Yeah, well, he told your brother after that spectacular, you know, all the coverage of this, and it was possession of, you know, marijuana, but the coverage was intense and it was front page story. And he tells him, don't worry, come here, I'll take care of you.
Right.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But there's that great line he put in the public release about he'll make manly restitution.
Yes. And, you know, Bobby, when he eulogized him, used the word, this is how he had always seen manliness. And I thought it was really interesting. I noticed those two words in there juxtaposed against each other. And I think Dad saw manliness as the ability to love and to forgive your kid, not to yell at your child, to support your wife in whatever she wants to do. And for a lot of men in this country, that's a different vision of what manliness is. You know, we've got to be the alpha male. We've got to yell at our kids and dominate our family. And Dad didn't see it that way. And I think he was happily married for 56 years, got 5 kids who love him. And for me, raising 3 kids with my wife, I wanted to learn that, to see how it would be a different type of man, one that was full of love and unconditionally so.
Let's talk for a moment about, you were there when he dropped out of the 1976 presidential run. It was at the National Press Club.
Yes.
And you took a lesson from that moment. What was it? Tell us about it.
Well, we got in the car and went on the airplane, and the Secret Service men came over and made Dad sign some paperwork, and then they walked off the airplane. The doors close, and it's over. They're gone. When you land, you're getting your own cab. You're picking up your own bags. You don't have Secret Service protection. And what I took away from that was that when push comes to shove in politics, you know, there are a lot of people that tell you great things about you, but as soon as you lose, you're done.
You're out.
You're out. And what's really important is your faith, your relationship with your friends and your family, and the work you're trying to do. But all the adulation and the people telling you how wonderful you are really is gone the day you're out. And I don't think that affected Dad because I don't think he really ever listened to that.
Yeah, you said he had a spiritual confidence about him, even in the midst of, you know, letting go of his big dream, really.
I think so. I don't know whether that was his big dream. I think he wanted to do it because I think he saw at that moment that that was an opportunity to try to make the country a better place. I think the next day after the election's over, honestly, he just never complained and moaned about the loss. He was ready to do something new, and that could be anything for him. You know, whatever opportunity came forward, he was ready to pursue it.
Tell me about his many gifts as a father. He was a great note writer. Tell us about this and the impact it had on you as a child.
He wrote notes when I was in high school and slipped them under the door almost every day. You know, what he had read.
Say? What would they be?
It was everything
about?
from a box score in a baseball game to the dinner conversation. When I got a little older, there were notes were accompanying a book by Gary Wills or Elie Wiesel or Cardinal Lustiger. I mean, you know, Henry Nouwen. They were every type of book. And he'd mark the margins about the great parts that he thought were really relevant. And he'd encourage you to read the book. It may be somebody he bumped into on the street. But what he was doing was showing love and interest in his kids. And he was challenging you intellectually, trying to push you spiritually by slipping these notes or mailing 1 or 2 a day after I'd been married. My wife, you know, our mail went down a lot after Dad got sick with Alzheimer's because we didn't get those 2 letters every day. You know, sometimes it'd be 2, 3 a day.
Wow.
Just you know, updates on what the family was doing, some thoughts he had. And they weren't text or emails. They were handwritten notes.
Handwritten notes.
On legal paper. And I put one in the back of the book, the note he wrote me when I graduated from high school, which was very powerful, I found when I went back and researched the book.
Yeah, you want to share it with people? It's a beautiful letter.
Sure. It just says, happy graduation day, Mark, and congratulations. Always remember that you are a unique, infinitely valuable person. Your mother and I love you. So do your brothers and sisters and friends. But all of our love and interest put together cannot compare with the passion and interest and love God himself showers on you. You are his. He wants you, and he will make you the perfect man you want to be. Love, Daddy. And what struck me about that was, you know, you'd think that on a graduation day you'd tell your kid to work hard in college and his dreams would come true, that America was the land of opportunity. And what he wrote was, God loves you. Yeah. And your brothers and your sisters and your mother, and I love you. And I think he felt, which is true, that if you know you're loved, you can do anything. And that's the message he wanted to get over to an 18-year-old kid, and it's reassuring to a 48-year-old man, too.
There's a great line in the book that I love. And you wrote, "I grew up with faith, hope, and love as explicit topics in my household and with my father, who embodied and lived by those three tenets." In what way does he still represent those three tenets for you?
I think in the notes that he wrote, in the lessons he taught my kids, you know, my dad suffered from Alzheimer's the last 10 years of his life, and our oldest is 14. We have a girl who's 14, Molly, a son, Tommy's 12, and Emma, who's 7. So they know my dad. They didn't know him really well, but I remember when he turned 93, he was cleaning off his, you know, he took the last scoopful of cake, and he had Alzheimer's and a little problem with his knees. And Tommy was, at that point, 9 or 10. And Dad got up, took his plate, and walked into the kitchen and started, you know, cleaning his dish. And my son looked at me, took a last forkful of ice cream, and took his plate and went into the kitchen, too. And he was learning from his grandfather at 93 that regardless of how old you are or how infirm you are, you can help. And I think that's the message my kids got. They also got a sense of his joyfulness. He would play catch with them even a couple of weeks before he died, and he'd start to throw it to one and give him a head fake and throw to the other one, and he'd laugh.
Wow.
So they know that he had a joyful side to him, but that you also had to help out around the house and be a good man.
This long 10-year battle with Alzheimer's, I know must have been wrenching for you to be a part of. You asked him at one point, there were, as people, I don't know, those who aren't familiar with Alzheimer's, it is a terrible disease, but it comes and goes. There are moments of lucidity, and then they don't remember how to tie their tie or their shoelaces. You ask your father at one point, and you're driving along, or I think you're driving, and you ask, "You're losing your mind, Dad. How are you doing with that?" And what does he say?
He says, "I'm doing the best I can with what God has given me." And I reflected back on that, and I think that that's the way he lived his life. Whether he was given the chance to survive the Depression after his family lost all their money, whether it was surviving World War II, whether it was, you know, arranging the Kennedy funeral, which Jackie Kennedy asked him to do on a Friday afternoon for Monday, and he had to organize not only the Mass, but all these foreign dignitaries and all of that work. I think he always did the best he could with what God had given him. And he realized in joyful times and in sad times to keep pushing ahead. And he realized he wasn't God. And he realized that these were gifts from God. And that's what I think, you know, made him so joyful every day and so driven to try to make a difference. He realized he was trying to do God's will.
He married into this political dynasty in so many ways. Did they thwart his political career, do you think? There's a lot of speculation that they did.
The answer is Dad never complained once about it to me. And
what is your gut, though?
As I wrote in the book, in vino veritas, you know, he had a couple of drinks with my friends, he had a couple of drinks with the family around, and he never complained. He never said, you know, I got shortchanged by the family. He loved my mom, got along with his brother-in-laws and his sister-in-laws, and I think was grateful for the opportunity that God had given him. And just as he said, you know, I'm doing the best I can with what God's given me, he got the chance to start the Peace Corps. He got the chance to work with Vice President Johnson to create the Peace Corps and then to run the war on poverty. So I think, you know, he never complained, so I'm not going to complain for him.
I want to talk about the last lesson your father gave you, and it was when you were arranging his funeral.
Yes.
And he asked to be buried in a Trappist sack.
Trappist burlap sack, yes.
But we don't allow that in the United States, so you had to make some accommodations.
Yes, so I researched and found that the Trappists were making coffins in Iowa, I believe. And so I called the guy up and went through what they offered. And I ended up buying the plainest one they have. And it's just I think it's a pine box, just simply a pine box. And I often thought, you know, as I was sitting there getting ready for the Mass, people would think we were cheap. And then I realized that really his life was trying to keep it simple and to focus on what was important. When you went into his rooms, there were pictures of his mother and father, of Cardinal Gibbons, of St. Thomas More, you know, St. Joan of Lustiger, I believe, quotes on the wall, and, you know, crucifix and rosary beads, and that was it. You know, no pictures of him with famous people, none of the pictures of him with presidents or cardinals. Kept it simple, and that's what he wanted in death. And he taught me that, you know, what was really important was your faith. And it's not to be buried in a fancy box or to have all these fancy pictures. It's to do what was right, and that's to have a relationship with God. And I think that's what really, as I said, gave him all of his energy.
What is the lasting lesson that you wish the rest of the world to know and to take with them, particularly fathers?
I think what his life really was about was that commitment to faith, and that he made that a #1 priority, and that his kids felt that, and clearly his wife did, and he married a woman who believed the same thing. And I think that when you have that foundation, you can really do anything. And I think that his faith demanded including everybody. It demanded including Jews and Protestants and Catholics and Muslims. It demanded the atheists, all to try to do, as he said, our Father's business, capital O, capital F. And he said that as a public sector person in 1966. And I think our Father's business is to help the poor, to feed the hungry and to clothe the naked. And that's what he called. So I guess the one message is I hope people, maybe they write their kids a couple more notes, slip them under the door so it shows that you are caring about your children.
That's one of the little tricks I said, you know, I have to start doing that. It's a great...
Because they see that you care about it. Yeah,
right.
It's not an email or a text in some hieroglyphic language. It's really that you sat down and took it out, your pen out, and wrote your kid a note. And I think, you know, the faith thing is clearly the most important part of his life.
A Good Man, Rediscovering My Father, Sargent Shriver, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. Up next, we'll talk about that special bond between fathers and daughters and how it can be strengthened. Dr. Meg Meeker is here to answer all of those troublesome questions and talk about her new book that can give fathers some real tips. The World Over Live continues in a moment.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My next guest is a well-known speaker on children's health issues and the parent-child relationship. For over 25 years, she's practiced pediatric medicine. She's also the author of Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, The 30-Day Challenge, which is a companion to her 2007 book of the same name. Here to remind us of the benefits of the strong father-daughter relationship and to offer some concrete advice for getting there is Dr. Meg Meeker. Dr. Meeker, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Raymond.
Let's talk for a moment. Why is this father-daughter bond so crucial? What do the statistics tell us? What does your clinical experience tell you?
Well, my clinical experience lines up right with what all the data says, which is overwhelmingly, and we've got a lot of data on the parental-child relationship. Daughters who grow up with a dad in the home are much less likely to be depressed, have much higher self-esteem, more likely to go into college, and far less likely to get into all of the bad stuff like sex, drugs, and alcohol way too early. So that's just the beginning. And the sad thing is I don't think most fathers realize that. Particularly divorced fathers have no idea how enormous they are in their daughters' lives.
What is the connection and the influence of the father on a daughter, or the mother on the son for that matter? What is the opposite sex? Tell me what that relationship is like and why a father is so critical.
A father is very critical to a daughter because he really has a huge impact on the development of her identity. You know, a daughter looks up to a dad with a sense of authority. I always tell dads, in your daughter's eyes, you have an authority with a capital A. It's enormous. And daughters look to their dads from very early on to see, what do you think about me? Do you think I'm smart? Do you think I'm capable? Do you think I'm athletic? So they read their dads to figure out who they are. Dad is particularly important for the development and the sharpening of a healthy sexuality in a girl in ways that a mother really can't be. So it's really that play of the feminine and the masculine in the home that really helps develop a healthy identity in girls.
You mentioned there how healthy sexuality is formed out of that father-daughter relationship. How so? What does a girl need to receive from her father during those formative years to have a healthy sexuality and a healthy view of herself and what she needs looking for a mate?
Well, it's a great question. You know, opposites sort of sharpen opposites. The masculinity sharpens the femininity. But you know, Raymond, we know that a lot of teenage girls and the pre-adolescent girls who don't have dads are engaging in sexual activity very early on only for male attention. It's so clear, it's overwhelming. But we know that when they have a dad in the home, dad is the one who gives her a sense of you are wonderful, you are beautiful, you are in charge of who you're becoming. And dad is the one who really teaches her to set up those boundaries with young men. And it's through that experience that a sexuality develops.
You say that the father, in the book you say the father is the template.
Yes.
for the girl. Explain that, what that means.
Yes, he teaches a daughter how to, a daughter's first exposure to male love is through her dad. Her first exposure to learning how to trust a man, believe in a man, have faith in a man, whether men are good or whether they're bad. So dad really, that's why I call him the most important man in her life, because a daughter teaches, a father teaches a daughter how she's going to relate to male figures for the rest of her life. Whether it's a brother, whether it's a priest, whether it's a teacher, whether it's her husband, it's extremely important, and he really sets that path for how she's going to relate to men.
Now, you say, you counsel in the book, give your daughter more of you. How do you do that?
Give your daughter your presence. And it's very difficult. One of the reasons I wrote the book is that dads bond very differently with their kids than daughters bond with their dads and moms. Daughters bond through language. Dads bond through activities.
Right.
That's why dads like to always throw the football. Your daughter wants to sit down and talk to you. Now, the great news for dads is you don't really have to do a lot of talking back, but that's how she bonds with you. So giving your daughter...
Shut up and listen is really the important lesson
And
here.
dads can be better listeners than mothers in many ways, because we interrupt our daughters so much because we need to talk as well. But giving your daughter really more of you is really about being present with her, face to face. It doesn't mean being with her and being on your iPad and your computer and so forth. Being present, letting her know that you want her company, and asking her questions and really listening to the answers that she gives you.
And how do you improve that communication? For men, words are the last thing we go to. And you know, the whole Mars-Venus thing, we think we're saying one thing, it's being interpreted entirely differently. What would you counsel fathers to do?
Don't worry about it. You don't need to how to learn to speak differently. You need to learn to listen very well, because your daughter is going to figure out very quickly what you think about her, what you like about her, what you believe about her, without you really saying a word. Daughters are great at reading body language and facial expressions. So when you sit there with your daughter having a conversation, she's reading you the whole time. So it doesn't even matter so much what you say, it's just what you believe about her and how you kind of communicate to her.
What do you never want to say to a girl as a father?
There are a few things, and I write them in the book. Never comment on her weight, because you will say the wrong thing. No matter what you say, she will interpret it in a negative way. So never comment on her weight. Be very careful how you comment on her appearance. You know, our culture teaches girls that their value lies in being busty and skinny.
Beautiful
and yes. And we don't want to do that. As Catholics, what we want to teach our kids is, you know, your character is what matters. So comment on her character. Comment on how patient she is, how she perseveres through difficult times. Very limited comments on her appearance.
What's the biggest mistake women make vis-a-vis the father-daughter relationship? So what is the mistake the mothers sometimes make in that relationship?
We push dads aside. You know, we are taught that we know everything about our daughters, and we believe we do because we're women and they're daughters. And we, in many ways, push the dads out of the way. We interrupt when they're having conversations with daughters. I found myself doing this. We have 3 grown daughters. My husband will be having a great conversation, and I will swoop in and interrupt him and take over. So we tend to take over, and we need to learn to really back off, because the truth of the matter is there are times a dad can parent a daughter through things in a much better way and more effective way than a mom can. So we mothers need to learn to give dads their space with our daughters and take a back seat. A lot of jealousy there, but that's okay.
You say in the book that you are the hero in your daughter's life, and you suggest a lot of practical tips, things you can do with your daughter to sort of counteract some of the things you mentioned here, or to lean into them and to create a deeper bond. One of the things you suggest in this you're the hero in your daughter's life, is taking her dancing. Why?
Because
I mean, aside from the night.
The fun. Yes, aside from, and I know that some dads are going to read that and kind of give them the heebie-jeebies, but you know, daughters ascribe the status of hero to their dads right from the get-go. So it's not a status that you have to earn. Dads say, I'm not a hero, but what they think of a hero and what your daughter thinks of a hero are very different. Daughters look to their dads to have integrity, to always have to be truthful, to be honest, to be good, to protect them. That's what a hero is. And the dancing exercise is really about showing your daughter that she can trust you and she can trust you to lead her. Now, a lot of women don't like to hear that, but it's very important. Daughters like to dance with their dads because dad is stronger, dad is bigger, and they lead and they show them, I know what I'm doing, so you may want to take a few dance lessons ahead of time. And this is how we do this.
Here. You can do it in the den and dance around or whatever. I mean, I find there's some music that I like to listen to that she's not quite sold on, my little daughter. But I'll put it on and she'll dance with me to it. And then she'll stay in the office and she wants to keep dancing. So we do that. And then, of course, then my little boy comes and knocks, hey, I want to turn too. So then the three of us end up dancing. But it's good.
There you go.
We have a question, and we have several of them, and I want to give a little time to the viewers. Not just a little time, more than that. It says, how do you help a woman who grew up without a dad because of death and they had no male image in the home? How do you help them?
Well, I think that you have to be honest and truthful and understand there are many things that daughters want from their fathers. There are needs that we are born with that are God-given, that are meant to be filled by men. If a daughter loses a dad through death or divorce, some of those needs aren't filled, and women carry that hurt with them far into the future, into their marriages. The most important thing for a woman like that to do is to recognize, what did I need from my dad that I wasn't able to get? And to grieve those, to face them, and then close them and move on. If she doesn't, the danger is she'll have difficulty in her relationships with future husbands and with God, Raymond.
Yeah, because we get our model of God from fathers in many, in many instances. This is another woman who's asking, as a single mother with Father's Day looming, her daughter is asking about the father who isn't in the home. What would you suggest?
Well, you need to hit it head on. She'll say, why isn't dad there? You know, did I do something wrong? And no matter what you tell her, she'll feel it's her fault. So the most important thing to do is, yes, we miss dad. Yes, it would be great if dad were here, but he can't be here because of X, Y, and Z. And say, it's not you, it's all about dad. And then the most important thing to do is to understand that a single mom can't be dad and mom to a daughter. For mom to be strong enough to accept that and then find substitute surrogate male figures in her life that she can bring to life. Talk about them, expose your daughter to them, have them over for dinner. If he's married and has other family, ask if he would take the daughter out to a movie or out to the park, include the daughter, because it's all about bringing good men to life in her mind so that she can say, as she gets older, would so-and-so, would Uncle Bob act that way, would Grandpa so-and-so act that way, because she needs to know how good men are supposed to treat her and mom. That's how she seeks out good men.
Let's talk for a moment about the best situation for kids. We hear and read about all sorts of living arrangements and alternative means of parenting. What is the best situation, statistically and clinically speaking, for that child?
You know, I'm so glad you asked, because a great new study came out from the University of Texas on 3,000 young adults. And the study found overwhelmingly that kids who had a mom and a dad married in the home for the life of that child did much better than alternate kinds of arrangements. And I think that's very important, because regardless of what our agenda as adults is, we can have those, but we need to constantly be putting our kids first. What is best for our children? And clearly, mom and dad in the home is the best situation for kids.
And do you think it's because of that complementarity that exists there? Again, we get something from our mothers, we get something from our dads, and as you said earlier, there's no way for the same-sex parent to quite give that to the daughter, for instance. She needs to get it from her dad.
Exactly.
And vice versa.
Exactly. Boys need their dad in the home when they're teenagers. Mom cannot give them what a dad can, and dads can give a daughter something that mom can't give. It's meant to be that way, and it's okay. And I realize that a lot of our viewers are single parents and hearing this and thinking, uh-oh, does that mean my child is doomed? No, it doesn't mean your child is doomed. But recognize what you can give and what you can't give, and then fill in the hole with great women and great men. Most important thing to do.
Interesting. Dominic from New Jersey, you have a question for Dr. Meeker. Go ahead.
In view of the rampant disobedience from the children to the parents, what would you find to be the most serious reason, the primary reason for this rampant disobedience today? And I'll hang up and listen. And thank you very much for taking my question.
Okay.
What a great question. Rampant disobedience of kids. Honestly, I think that parents are very confused. I think dads are really confused. The messages that fathers have gotten from our culture, look at television, sitcoms, movies, is that, you know, just sort of stay in the background, don't interact with the kids, just sort of orbit the family because you drink too much beer, you hog the channel changer, and you're not really good for much. Try to find a great Father's Day card.
Oh, I know. No.
So dads take a back seat and don't trust their instincts to parent and to discipline. And moms want kids to be happy, happy, happy all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And they feel that that's their #1 job. I don't know where we ever got that. My mother didn't feel that way.
No,
you know,
no,
her job was to love and to care for and to nurture and to lay down the law, and that was it.
Yeah.
But she wasn't responsible for my happiness. So when you discipline and you confront your children, you know they're not going to be happy. Parents don't like conflict and confrontation. So that's why we have a generation of kids who are growing up with hands-off parenting.
Well, but they're being raised by the culture.
Exactly.
And in the culture, the vision of men, certainly of fathers, is somewhere between Will Ferrell and an axe murderer. I mean, those are the options.
Yes.
You know, you're either a goofball or you're a Lifetime movie. You know, you're just waiting to push the woman down the stairs and cut the kids up at dinner time. I mean, it's bizarre.
Gone are good men.
Yeah.
Gone are good men.
Good men.
In the movies.
Yeah. This is another important email. What happens when the father breaks the trust of the daughter, either through abuse or infidelity against the mother? What would you suggest?
Well, that's very, very painful.
Tough.
Again, it's very, very painful. And those are sort of different situations. You know, if there's marital infidelity, yes, that's painful for the daughter, but it's more painful for the wife. And so it's really important for mom to recognize in a situation like that, even though these offenses have been committed, a daughter still wants her dad. I have counseled girls whose dads have been in prison because of abuses in the home, and they still wanted their dad. When I started seeing them, they didn't want me to criticize the dad. So it's very important to set up healthy boundaries, to talk about the break of trust. Mom, and you know, maybe a counselor, grandfather, somebody, help the daughter heal from that and say, what can we resurrect? What can we salvage from this relationship, if any, to know that the daughter always wants healing with her dad, and she wants contact. It's a need that's tied by love with the dad.
Yeah,
human want and human need, and it's very raw in a young girl's life. So daughters want their dads, even though these offenses have been committed.
There's something you say in the book that certainly resonated with me, and I think it will for any man listening. You say, one day someone will ask your daughter a question about you. Will she burst into tears because of the painful history between the two of you, or will she gush about how wonderful you are? Every daughter is born with a father-shaped hole in her heart.
Yes,
Do men understand that,
No.
do you think?
I don't know. I know there are many adult men out there who are still trying to get their dad's approval that they never got. There's something about that dad. He's enormous. Many men aren't running around trying to get their mother's approval, but it's always from the dad. And what I have found is that daughters every woman takes one man to her grave. If she's lucky, she takes two. She takes her father, and if she's lucky, she takes a great husband. But daughters, no matter what their age, always want more from their dads. They want more healing, or they want more time.
And usually
they want more hugs.
And the father is the precursor to the husband that she'll be with later.
Yes, he is. And I found that when I interviewed a lot of women for my book, they either gushed about their dads or they burst into tears.
Wow. Very quick question. Some parents, and I know some of these parents, they say they're raising children, they're good Catholic people, but they say, you know what, I'm going to let the child make his own or her own decisions about faith. Good idea, bad idea?
Very bad idea.
Why?
Very bad idea. Because you need to teach them who God is before they can reject him. And if we don't teach them the tenets of faith and why we believe, then they have nothing to choose from. And I think that the reason we wouldn't do that is because of fear. You know, we say we want our kids to choose their faith. Give them something to reject, but they want to know why you believe what you do.
Yeah, I always say, try that thinking with nutrition. Put the infant there and let it choose and feed itself. See what happens. Strong fathers, strong daughters. The 30-day challenge is available at bookstores everywhere and online at the usual outlets. You can follow Dr. Meg Meeker by visiting her website, megmeekermd.com. It's a great read and very practical. Up next, Bill Donohue of the Catholic League is in studio. He'll take your questions, tell you why Catholicism matters, and explain his affectionate open letters to Maureen Dowd. When the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My first guest is the president of the Catholic League and a tireless defender of religious freedom and liberty. His new book is a bit of a departure for him, a celebration of the church and its effects on society. It's called Why Catholicism Matters, How Catholic Virtues Can Reshape Society in the 21st Century. Joining us here in our D.C. studio is Dr. William Donohue.
Thank you, Ray.
Good to have you aboard.
Good.
Now, let's start with this book. Your basic thrust here is that the church possesses the right recipe for a good society. Why?
Well, you know, it's amazing because the great philosophers throughout history have been looking at this. How do you craft a good society? And quite frankly, the answer's been there for 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. It's right in front of us. Now, people will say, well, you mean the Catholic Church is the answer? Of course it does. But don't you have sinners? Didn't you have a scandal? I love the way we segue into these things. Look, every person who ever failed us as a Catholic, certainly that would include members of the clergy, did so because they didn't follow the teachings. Now, if in fact people follow the teachings, beginning with myself, we wouldn't have problems. If the teachings were flawed, we'd have a different problem. What I'm saying is that the right recipe, the right ingredients, if you want to know how to craft a good society, follow the teachings of the Catholic Church, natural law, natural rights, a teleology or ultimate purpose where you focus on the other, reason in pursuit of truth. This is why we come out with the great contributions of Catholicism.
Now, I want to invite everybody into this conversation. We've already got a bunch of questions on Twitter and Facebook, but I want to invite you. This is a departure for you in the sense that your last book, Secular
Right.
Sabotage, was really about taking on the enemies of the church and looking at the problems in society and sort of going at them. This is a celebration of the many contributions of the church. I got an email earlier today. Has Bill Donohue gone soft? They asked. You would answer what?
Don't bet on it. If I take somebody taking a smack at the church, I hit him back twice. Once to even the score, and the second time so you don't have it started up again, all right? Now, I mean, here I am telling you as the president of the Catholic League. Look, I don't mean that in a physical sense.
I hope not.
Listen, here's exactly what I'm saying. The Catholic League does combat anti-Catholicism, but why? This book explains what we do. This is a book which says to Catholics who are practicing Catholics, be informed about the great traditions, the history of the Catholic Church. We're responsible for the first universities in the history of the world. We're responsible for the fight against slavery. We're the ones responsible for the scientific revolution, the great art and architecture and music. We're the ones who brought about freedom. It wasn't the Greeks. There was no word for freedom in the Chinese or Japanese language until the 19th century. And I also debunk a lot of myths about the Catholic Church regarding the Inquisition and the Crusades. So I cover a lot of ground. It's wrapped around the four cardinal virtues as a thematic.
I saw that, and it's a great read, and it's a quick read. I mean, you burn right through it. I want to talk about, with the Vatileaks scandal, with the sex abuse scandal that is continuing, Bill, the reportage of it anyway. People look at this and say, why should we look at this church for answers for what ails society?
Well, just like the Vatileaks story, I don't even know what the story is. The people gossip? I mean, what is? Do people have this idea that there's no jealousy in the Vatican? Do they know what the apostles did to Jesus? Do they know about the envy? I mean, I don't even see a story here. It's on the order of saying that there's competition and sometimes bad things said about little leaguers, and they fight with each other. So there's a leak at the Vatican. Why wouldn't there be a leak at the Vatican? People are sinners in the Vatican. The Pope goes to confession. We don't try to defend this kind of stuff. I don't think it's a non-story. I think what they're really saying is, you see, these guys are the great moral authority, and they have sinners. Right. Yes, but we know the teachings. Again, the teachings didn't fail us. If the priests had followed, every one of them who were miscreant priests, had they followed their vows and canon law as opposed to their id, we wouldn't have had this problem in the first place. Show me where Catholic teachings are flawed, and then I'll say then the whole book is lousy because it's defending a corrupt institution. The institution is made of human beings. The great teachings of the Catholic Church are there for everybody, not just Catholics.
You talk in the book about how liberty, freedom, individual liberty was really birthed by the Catholic Church. This is probably news for many people watching. Explain the origins of individual liberty, because most people say, look, your church, our church, is limiting people's freedom.
Yeah.
It says you can only do this and you can't do this here and you mustn't do that. You would say.
Well, for one thing, there's a proper understanding of freedom. The Catholic Church teaches that freedom is the right to do what you ought to do, not necessarily the idea of whatever you feel like doing. The Catholic Church has a responsible idea. It believes in ordered liberty. It believes in natural rights, rights which come from God, which are inalienable, which is picked up in our declaration. You know, and what's the alternative? Government posits or decrees your rights. Well, guess what happened after World War II? Those Nazis who were in trial in Nuremberg, how did we convict them? They were just simply following orders. If you go by what we teach today in the schools, which is that the law is whatever the government says, then you could not have prosecuted. The only way you can prosecute those people, and we did, is an appeal to natural law, that there's a higher law, a universal law, as Aristotle said, even before Aquinas,
right.
But we gave it a Christian cast. There is an idea of right and wrong written on the souls of men. In their heart of hearts, they know what's right and wrong. That's how we could convict the Nazis. We had to go back to Catholic teachings. Otherwise, they would have gotten off scot-free.
Let's talk about moral relativism. You address this in the book and how toxic it is because it erodes away at moral absolutes in a society. Why is that so dangerous? People, look, our whole society says we have to embrace and be tolerant of the diversity of moral thought, intellectual pursuits, historical perspectives. Why not allow everybody a place at the table?
I gave a talk a number of years ago at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and the students there, the PhD students, would say, you're very proud of the American value system. I said, yeah, you bet I am. There's no country in the history of the world better than the United States, and I love Western civilization and the Catholic Church's contribution to it. And I said, but I know what you're saying. All cultures are basically equal, different strokes for different folks. They said, yes, that's right. I said, oh, I get it. I understand. In this country, we put pizza into ovens, and in Nazi Germany, they put Jews into ovens. It's a matter of different strokes for different folks. And these guys who were Jewish said, wait a minute, that's not what we mean. I said, well, it is what you mean. It's a logical conclusion if, in fact, there's no external authority, if there's no moral absolute, if the idea that it's willy-nilly, that we're own moral arbiter, you say it's wrong for me to pick your pocket, I say I'm better off, I'm richer if I do.
Let's move on to the role of the church in society. The book is filled with examples of how the church has contributed. You mentioned universities a moment ago. Talk about the contribution to health care. We are fighting a major war, and it involves religious liberty, lawsuits, and it's centered around the right to practice and exercise faith via health care. Tell us about the church's
Well, here we have the great contribution of the nuns. I mean, they're unbelievable what the nuns have done in this country and around the world. The Ursuline nuns in 1727 founding the first hospitals. We have over 600 hospitals today. Without the nuns, we wouldn't have gotten there. And most nuns are good people. We've had a problem, of course, with some people who've mistaken their vocation for that of social work or beyond. But they're in a minority. I do think that in terms of not only the healthcare, the hospices, Mother Teresa reaching out to the AIDS victims, the foundling homes, the asylums, all the reaching out to the dispossessed, the Dorothy Day taking in people who nobody else would deal with, the drug addicts and the others. And by the way, Dorothy Day didn't believe that the government was the answer. She didn't agree that the New Deal was the answer, that kind of depersonalization. If you want to help the dispossessed and the needy, you go out there and you do it one-on-one. Dorothy Day had much more in common with Mother Teresa than some people in our own community want to give her credit for.
Interesting. You brought up the nuns. Now, some people watching will say, okay, if the nuns did so much, why is the Vatican now cracking down on the sisters? That's what they're hearing in the press today. Well, the Vatican is cracking down on the nuns who've given them so much.
Let me tell you something. I've never seen an institution like the Catholic Church which tolerates more dissent than the Catholic Church. If you were working at the New York Times and you were a reporter and you came to a pro-life position, better still, if you were on the editorial board and you were persuaded to a pro-life position, they would throw you out. They wouldn't inquire, how come you've strayed so far? I mean, who's being punished? Whose licenses are being taken away? If there's reason to believe, and I'm sad to say, because I've worked with nuns who have, in fact, lost their vocation, and instead of becoming a Protestant or something, they camp out, and then they expect us to say, well, there's room for both of you? Look, abortion is wrong. It's an intrinsic evil. And if you happen to be a nun or a priest, for that matter, Kathleen Sebelius, hello, if you don't think abortion is an intrinsic evil, I think you're in the wrong camp, all right? Find yourself another religion.
Now, there is a letter from Maureen Dowd has been writing about
my girlfriend.
you often, the columnist at the New York Times.
Yes.
She recently wrote, the church insists that this whole HHS mandate fight and the lawsuits are an argument about religious freedom, not birth control. But really, it's about birth control and women's lower caste in the church. It's about conservative bishops targeting Democratic candidates who support contraception and abortion rights as a matter of public policy. You took great umbrage to Maureen and wrote an open letter to her. What explains the back and forth, this interesting relationship between you two?
She's actually a secret admirer of mine, I think it is. Look, I don't know. I mean, you know, if women want equality, they have to stop with always being the victim, all right? Listen to that. She's always like the weepy, delusional gal who thinks that the bishops sit around, but the chastity belts and whatnot. I don't know where this stuff comes from. So I wrote a kind of a, you know, sarcastic piece that, yes, I've been with the bishops. They do want a chastity belt. They want one size fits all. The problem with Velcro is that it tends to come off. And what, did they actually believe this? Or are they really, I don't know what they've been smoking. Because anybody who believes that the bishops sit around and think of ways in which we can oppress these gals and put them in their place really needs to check in maybe and get some professional help. But we do have it in the Catholic Church. You can pray. You get an answer. Stay with it, Maureen.
Tell me about the battle over marriage. This week, in fact, today, we had a circuit court, an appellate court, throw out the Defense of Marriage Act. They claim it is discriminatory towards same-sex couples who are married. The question arises, and I had some emails earlier today. Bill, how does the marriage of two same-sex guys or same-sex gals, how does that hurt your marriage or anyone's marriage?
If my neighbor across the hall from me beats his wife, it has no direct effect on me. But if I want to live in a sane society, I have to be concerned about men beating women, and I have to be concerned about the way children are reared. Marriage is not about love. It's not about adults. Marriage is about procreation. It's about children. Otherwise, we wouldn't institutionalize it, would he? Or we would just simply have people fornicating and falling in love. Fred and Fido can be in love, too. We don't want to see them to go down the aisle next. The fact of the matter is this. Is marriage between a man and a woman for the purpose of reproduction, is that special? If it is, it has to be treated special in law. If it's an alternative lifestyle, then we shouldn't give it any benefits whatsoever. Now, if marriage is important, and all the sociological literature show that children need a mother and a father, they don't need 2 adults or 3 adults. They need a mother and a father for various psychological and sociological reasons. If we know that's the answer, and nature has ordained that 2 men can't have children and 2 women can't have children. Therefore, it makes no sense to extend an institution and make it so elastic as to encompass Tom, Dick, and Harry, because that's the next step. Once you get rid of the idea of the separation of marriage from procreation, now you've gotten rid of tradition. But you know what bothers me, too, about this? The whole history of the world, this is a big statement, in the entire history of the world, every major religion, Western civilization, Eastern civilization, they've all thought it absolutely normal to create an institution of marriage, and typically between a man and a woman. You've never seen in the world history, it's like as if yesterday we woke up and we said, everybody in the history of the world up until now has been wrong. And this kind of cultural arrogance that you have to be engaging Tom and Dick to get married and Tom, Dick, and Harry because they're equally in love. I put out in this book, and I dealt with this with Piers Morgan. He couldn't answer me, and the gay guy couldn't answer me. Patricia and Alan Muth, a brother and a sister, they went into court because they wanted to get married. How can you say no to them? There was a case recently, a guy came from Ireland. He impregnated his daughter. They said they're in love, and they want to get married, a father and a daughter. And what about polygamy? What about a man and a woman who are living in a state of cohabitation? They're not married, but they want marital benefits. They've been in the courts as well. Where do you draw the line?
Well,
For me, it's very easy.
This week,
you draw the line by what nature has ordained.
I want to go to the phone. Mary Ann, you have a comment.
I just want to say I had read many years ago an article, actually an interview with Arthur Schlesinger, the great historian who is not Catholic, but who did say that the last acceptable prejudice in America is anti-Catholicism. And that is as true today as it was when he gave this interview many years ago. It's just so important. It breaks my heart when I hear Catholics bashing the church. It breaks my heart. And you're right, Mr. Donohue, if you have a disagreement and if you don't like the church, then you should leave. But to tear down the beliefs and the values and the love and the passion that so many good Catholics have for the church it's beyond the pale.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you.
Well, it was Arthur Schlesinger Sr. who made that comment. And, of course, when he talked about that back in the 50s, he was talking about the discrimination against Catholics as individuals. We've made a lot of progress in terms of in the workplace and at school where we've gone backwards. And that's why Schlesinger Sr. was correct to say this more ways than he knew at the time. We've gone back in terms of the defamation. The things that are said about the Catholic Church and by the artistic community, by the activist community in the schools and the media and the like, and by the threats coming from the government, particularly the federal government, we have a lot of threats against us today, but it's a very different genre or expression of anti-Catholicism than what Schlesinger Sr. talked about.
Well, that is all the time we have, but I want to get this one question in before we run out here. Why do people need to read this book, Why Catholicism Matters, and what will they get from it that they haven't gotten from anything else?
If you're a practicing Catholic, it'll give you the ammunition. And it's not just good to, I don't want people to be proud without having knowledge. That's almost tribalistic. For those who have one step outside the church, it might bring them back. For a young people, a whole generation have heard nothing but negative things, it'll be a good tonic. And for those who are not Catholic, a refresher course. A lot of the black legends are knocked out, even dealing with the Crusades and the Inquisition. This book is not going to be a popularity contest for me, but it's talking about the strengths of the Catholic Church. I'm waiting for somebody who wants to debate me. Don't just tell me I'm wrong. Be specific, and then we'll sit down and we'll have a man-to-man debate.
No.
Or myself and Maureen, a guy-girl debate.
Oh, well, now, I'll be happy to bring the cameras
Well, unless
to
I
that
fall
one.
in love with my shoe. In the meantime, there's people can fall in love with anything else these days.
Be nice, Bill. The book, Why Catholicism Matters, is available at bookstores everywhere. Why Catholicism Matters, How Catholic Virtues Can Reshape Society in the 21st Century. It's also available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. And you can follow the work of the Catholic League and Bill at catholicleague.org. That's all the time we have, but the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. There you'll find the latest news, some commentary, and things you won't find anywhere else. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye now.